You're listening to the Ones Ready podcast, a team of Air Force Special Operators forged in combat with over 70 years of combined operational experience, as well as a decade of selection instructor experience. If you're tired of settling and you want to do something you truly believe in, you're in the right place. Now here's your host, PJ Team Leader, former INDOC instructor supervisor, entrepreneur, and physician assistant student, Brian Silva.
What's up, everybody? Brian Silva for Ones Ready Podcast. Today we have OB in the studio again, talking about the Thai cave rescue. So if you haven't checked out the other episode, you can go check it out on YouTube podcast. Basically, we talk about this guy saving babies on planes, dudes from tractor fires, and a bunch of other awesome stuff. And he won the 12 Outstanding Airman of the Year. So he's a PJ stationed out in Okinawa, Special Tactics team leader, and we're really glad to have him on the show again. So OB, thanks again for being on here. We also have Aaron and Trent here in the team room.
What up?
So what's up?
Yep.
So we're just going to be going over the Thai cave rescue. It's a pretty complex mission set. If you didn't hear about it, it was in the news all over the place.
If you
12 kids,
by chance didn't pay attention to international news as it applies to pararescue men in 2018 and 19.
Then you might have been one of the people in the cave.
You actually might have one of those people underneath a rock.
And you already know OB. So, so check it out. You can look at the news stories. There's lots of graphics. There's a movie about it. So you can look at all that kind of stuff and just get the big overview of what the cave looked like and what the people making the actions and doing all that stuff look like. But we got OB here to actually explain to us and to you guys exactly what it was like to be there, and a couple stories of lessons learned and that kind of thing that you guys can look back on for you guys that are looking towards this type of career field. So, like I said, overview of everything was there were kids, as far as I understood it, reading the article, there were 12 kids that were with their coach, and they were going kind of in these caves and wandering around. A monsoon hit, and it kind of locked them in there. There was a bunch of different obstacles that they had to climb into. I'll let you explain, what they were really doing in there, because I didn't understand that portion of the story. But that's kind of the overview that I got, and they were in there for a long time. And you had international forces that were coming around from all over the world trying to help these guys out, and even Elon Musk at some point helping these guys that are trying to figure out solutions. But that's the big overview from what I understand it. If you don't mind kind of clarifying and, adding in whatever little key factors you think people need to know about.
Yeah. So thanks again for having me on. It actually wasn't abnormal for them to go into this cave, but it started in 23 June. I believe it was one of their birthdays. And there's like a rite of passage. They would go to this certain point in the cave and write their names on the wall. And that's what they were doing. So it wasn't anything too crazy. The big problem was that most of them did not tell their parents. Only like a couple of them told them where they were going. And they went the week prior to when the rainy season usually starts. And of course, rainy season decided, hey, we're going to start early this year. So, it's bright skies, good to go when they went in. And then a storm hit and flooded while they were in there, and then they were unable to get out. And then they went further back trying to find a different way out, and then they kind of got trapped. So that's one of the biggest questions I always get is like, how did they get in there? Why'd they go so far? But it really wasn't an uncommon thing. And some people think like, this was so complicated, how did a bunch of kids do it? I'm like, well, it wasn't flooded.
I love the armchair quarterbacking. Oh, if it was so complicated, how did a bunch of kids do it? Like, you have no idea what the cave looks like. You're just assuming based off a Wikipedia article and two like Vox articles how this happened. Okay, yeah. I guess it wasn't that complicated.
And 50-pound or like 100-pound kids are the best climbers out there. If you put any kid on anything, they can climb up any rock face.
Man, I had a 3-year-old that could climb on a couch. I mean, like seconds. She would be like 3 times her height. It was lickety split. Yeah, it's terrible. It wasn't because I was a bad parent. It was just because she was so good at it.
Yeah, so I don't think it was a struggle for them to necessarily get in there. And another question, people would be like, well, if it was so hard for you guys to fit through here, like how did they fit? Well, one, they're half our size, if not less. And then also, this is a cave that's flooded and muddy. And so there could have been a 24 by 24 foot hole 5 feet to our right, and no one would know it was there. So who knows what that thing looks like when it's not flooded. But anyway, so they go in there, they get stuck, and then their parents start to try to figure out what's going on. Like, where has all of our kids just disappeared? Like, where'd they go? And I think a couple of parents had known, so they went to the cave, and then they saw all the bicycles there. So they're like, okay, obviously they stopped here. And then some people went into the cave and then found some of their shoes and some book bags. So then that was a guarantee that they obviously went in there, but they couldn't get to them because it was flooded. So the Thai authorities and government tried to handle it, tried to figure out how they were going to do this. I think they started calling their military in, but then they realized, like, hey, this is too big. We're not the experts in this. We need to request help. So they sent out.
And by the way, that's how it happens stateside too. Like, we're going to get into how it is that you got tasked, but a lot of times, especially on civilian rescues for the PJ side, for people that don't know about it, this is exactly how these things flow out. Local and state authorities will show up and they'll be like, hey, can we do this? Can we not do this? And sometimes they're like, man, this is a little bit too complex. We need to start upping, going up the chain and going up the algorithm for who we're going to call. So, so far, pretty much a standard sort of rescue, it sounds like. And Obi, can you clarify, like, these kids were all on a soccer team or something together? We're not talking about like a roving boy band of Thai kids, right?
Yeah, they were on a soccer team. They're called the Wild Boars. So we actually called this Operation Wild Boar.
Oh, that's a great operation name. Well done. Operation Wild Boar.
Yeah, so there was 12 of them and then their coach that were missing. So they put out an international call, hey, we need some help. So that's when the British divers, they were world-renowned civilian cave divers, they got tasked through or I think requested, I wouldn't say tasked, requested through their government, and other people from all around the world, Australia, a few other European countries, all kind of converged. And at the same time, the U.S. also got requested. And basically it went to SOCPAC, which is Special Operations Command Pacific in Hawaii. And there was actually, luckily, there was a combat controller from the 320 Special Tactics Squadron that was working there. And he was like, hey, I know who can figure this problem out. And so that's kind of how it got dropped down to the Special Operations Group in Kadena that we fall under. So when we got the task, and then we're like, hey, we don't have enough guys for this, because we only have a few PJs. We had combat controllers, but we knew we needed more rescue specialists, basically. So we requested it from the rescue squadron that's across the airfield, and one of their guys happens to be a cave diver prior to becoming a PJ. But he was on leave, and he was flying in. Of course,
yeah, right.
Somewhere
he was cave diving on leave.
He'll approve this guy's leave. Get him in here immediately.
We actually were ready on the tarmac, all of our stuff packed out, and we're waiting for him to come from the airport at Naha. And so he came right from leave, and then just showed up on the plane and was like, "Hey, I'm here."
All right, he's here. We can go. So real quick, just from notification, because some of these, whether you're deployed or at home station, some of these kind of roll down a little bit slowly, and it's kind of like, oh, I heard that we might be doing this, like a couple days out, and then they're like, are they going to pull the trigger on this kind of thing? So how far from like notification, you're like, oh, we might be going to Thailand to do something, to you on the tarmac and made up with this guy and you fly off?
Yeah, so it was actually fairly quick. Basically, we were strangely getting ready for dive training that day. So
that's always the way. That's always the way it goes, isn't it? It's so it's so ironic that you put that out there. You're just like, oh yeah, and then you hear. I love hearing about these things too, because you're like, you hear about the situation going on. You're like, we're not going on this thing, and then like triggers keep getting met. And you're like, are we really going on this thing? And then pretty soon you're loading gear.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So we had it out, and they're like, hey, have you guys kept track with this thing happened in Thailand? So this was about 3 days after they had been stuck in there, and none of us had heard of it. They're like, well, kids are trapped in a cave. We may be going to help. And first thought was like, how can we help in a flooded cave? We're not we're dive qualified, but we're definitely not cave dive qualified. And they're like, nah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and
maybe we'll help somewhere else.
And for people that don't understand, first of all, dive operations in and of themselves are very complex. Like there's a certain amount you have to have a lot of people that can actually dive. There's a limit to how many times you can dive and how deep and all this other stuff. But put on top of that, cave diving is a sport that kills the people that are best at the sport. Like cave diving kills the people that are world renowned for being the best cave divers pretty regularly. So to even imagine taking on this sort of thing on a whim and just being like, hey, well, we were going to do some diving. Let's go. Like, good on you guys. Like that is that is a bold move. I like it.
Yeah. So that was kind of crazy. And basically I called my wife and I was like, hey, make me a bag. She was like, for how long? I was like, nah, I don't know. 4 days, maybe. It's going to be much longer than that, you know. 3 weeks later.
It's like the scene in SpongeBob. 3 weeks later.
Exactly. Yeah. So we get tasked, and then I think there was a few hours maybe where it was kind of like, we don't know, but get ready anyways. So we start prepping, and I think by the time we were on the tarmac was maybe 6 to 8 hours, if that. And we're ready to go, because by the time the whole timeline, we got notified 18 hours later, we had people at the cave in Thailand. So we went from Japan to Thailand with all of our gear and all our people in 18-ish hours. So that, that's pretty impressive.
That's not bad at all. Good on you guys.
Yeah, to move that many people. So I think we took roughly around 15 operators, about half combat controllers, half pararescue. And then we took another probably about 10 support personnel, communications, public affairs, logistics, and IDMT, a medic, and a flight doctor, maybe a few others. But yeah, we all just showed up. And basically, at that point, we didn't know what we were tasked with, really. It was go and advise and assist the Thai government on whatever they need. So it's kind of like show up and we're like, hey, we're here to help. And they're more like, who are you? And,
why are you here? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You're like team number 8 to show up. Like, which country are you from?
Yeah, exactly.
What are you doing here?
Yeah. And even at that point, we showed up and, there was hundreds, if not 1,000 people running around in front of this cave. And most of us went to go start like our rest cycle. And then some of our leadership went into the cave to kind of assess it. And basically they came out and they were like, this is super dangerous. There's no way we're diving in this thing. Like, we're going to help somewhere else, because they could visibly see the water rising and the current was really strong. It was just volatile. So they were just worried that like we were going to get into something that was, way over our head. We're already over our head, but it's going to be like way over our head. So they came to us and they're like, hey, don't worry about the cave necessarily. Our job is to find another way into the cave. So we were with the Thai special forces up in the jungle trying to find entrances on top of this mountain. And this was no small mountain, and the jungle was thick. The trees were covered in like these poisonous caterpillars. They must not be that poisonous, because I grabbed a hold of a couple on accident. But yeah, it was rough out there. And
I hope you don't take offense to this, OB, but I am so sick of hearing how cool you are. Now we got trees with poisonous caterpillars. You're saving babies, cats and dogs living together, and you always find yourself. Are we calling you the silver cloud or the gray cloud? Like, what are we supposed to call you? Like, get out of here, man.
Is what I like.
The gray cloud
happened, but they survived.
But it turns out to be okay. All right.
I like the silver cloud thing though, because there's like, it's gray, but there's a silver lining on everything, because it kind of just all works out.
We're gonna call you the gunmetal cloud, because it just sounds cooler.
Yeah, that is cool.
But yeah, so we're tasked with finding these alternate entrances, and we're walking around, and it, we always overpack. And so we're like, well, we need to have SATCOM capability. We need to have full on med rugs. We need all this stuff.
Oh, so you're just heavy walking through the jungle.
Each guy needs to have 6 liters of water. And, the Thais are walking by us with like a water bottle in their pocket.
And a t-shirt.
And they're just running up these mountains, and we're just struggling. And the poor controllers, they're carrying SATCOM, 117 golfs, all these radios, and we get to the top and our cell phones work.
Oh, no.
I was like, I'm sorry. So that was a rough few days. And of course we didn't find anything. Like, we found some holes, but they didn't lead to anything. So, and then it was like, okay, maybe we can drill into this mountain, and like basically drill and then, put a long camera in and find proof of life, I believe was the plan. We were just like, okay, whatever. And then it was like, okay, how are we going to get a drill on top of this mountain with, jungle?
This is essentially the plot to Armageddon, but in Thailand.
Yeah.
Is that what this is? Like,
yeah.
Was that where Elon Musk came in, like with the gigantic
he came
drill
a little
and
later
some
with
kind of?
this sweet little submarine? But
Okay.
yeah. So then we find this area. The controllers kind of do a semi-survey, and are like, okay, if the jungle's gone, this would work. So now we got to make the jungle gone. And of course, we didn't bring our chainsaws, our really awesome chainsaws that we have just sitting in our sour barn, never been used.
perfect.
We have to go on, downtown and buy these little baby chainsaws, and we cut down and made a helicopter landing zone. We actually made 2 of them. I think they only ended up using 1, but and then they sling loaded a drill into the location and started drilling. Around this time was when, no matter how many times they told us, hey, you're not diving, they're like, hey, we need 4 volunteers. We're going to start diving. And we're like, oh.
Oh,
okay.
man.
So
myself and 3 other guys volunteered to be the first ones to go in. And that's when the whole nother adventure started.
let me just try and understand this real quick. So there's people working on the ground, on the mountain, like you're hacking down trees. Meanwhile, other people are diving down there, right? Like all the Thai guys and whoever else showed up, and Australians and stuff are doing their own thing.
The Thais were diving, and the British divers were diving, and basically they were going in and setting up guidelines, and then just trying to go as far in as they could.
And meanwhile, you guys are essentially doing Pathfinder duties, clearing HLZs and drilling into the mountain to try to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And we had other people doing aerial searches. And then there was a whole nother, outside of us, there was a whole nother pumping operation going on, throwing in these big pumps into the cave, trying to draw all the water out.
Oh my God. That's just wild, dude.
Yeah. And then, other teams just trying to figure out what's the actual layout of this cave. Because we had like 4 different maps, all from different years, and nothing, they were all similar, but nothing really jived. And we also were realizing, we're like, man, we're pumping all this water out. We're destroying fields. Like people's livelihoods are getting just destroyed.
Oh,
and
no.
the water's not changing. And they figured out that the water table there, basically from like 3 or 4 different countries, if it rains, it affects the water table in that specific cave. So
there's no pumping it out.
Yeah.
But
You're pumping out the
brought in
ocean.
more and more pumps, and they actually were able to stabilize it. We didn't realize that they were actually stabilizing it until later, but it was doing something. It just wasn't doing what we had wanted. We wanted just like, we drained it out like a bathtub and we're good and we'll walk in. That wasn't going to happen.
And who had like overall oversight as far as like the American forces? How much say did you guys actually have? Because you mentioned that you guys specifically, like your unit went out and purchased saws, chainsaws to go clear down the field. Were you guys like, this is our idea, we're going to press with it, and they would really just, the Thai SEALs would do kind of whatever, good ideas popped up, or how did that work out?
Yeah. So no, we were there specifically advise and assist. We are not in charge. Like we were basically there as a provider. Like, what do you need? And then we did have to kind of figure out who was in charge, because there were so many different entities trying to coordinate it. And basically, there was just like a couple guys in the Thai government trying to coordinate all this and try to keep track. And not everyone would check in with them. People would just show up and start doing stuff. Like we were in the mountains and we'd walk for hours to go to the site that they think there's a hole in there, and we'd get there and there's like 50 dudes already there. Like,
oh no!
Cool. I'm so glad I just walked up here with my.
That had to be so frustrating. Yeah, that had to be so frustrating for you guys too. I've been kind of in those areas where you're just like, who's in charge? Like our natural inclination is just to be like, all right, everybody, I'm going to talk louder and we're going to organize this thing. Did you ever feel that frustration to where you're like, just let us take this thing over?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously had that frustration, but we also had to realize like this isn't. Like we're here to help. This isn't our people,
It's literally an international incident.
Yeah, and it was like as much as frustrated as we were. Like you kind of said, the same stuff happens in the States every time there's a disaster. It's just this like fight of like who's in charge. Okay, who's in charge today?
Yeah,
who's in charge the next day? And but yeah, so we're trying to figure that out. And the reason we got tasked to dive now was. As they're putting lines in, these guidelines are like, hey, we need a lot more air tanks because we don't know how long this is going to take. We don't know how far they are. They had a rough idea. There was a place called Pattaya Beach inside the cave, and it was kind of like a higher area. But they didn't know how long it would take. And so they're like, we need, I think the number was around 300 air tanks. Right? We need 300 air tanks in this cave as soon as possible.
That seems like too many air tanks, but okay, go on.
It was 2, and I don't know how many were used, but a lot were used. So, because I kind of laughed, like they're not going to find 300 air tanks in Thailand, let alone get them here. Oh no, they found them and they got them there super fast. I don't know where they just came out of nowhere,
manifested.
Yeah. So then we had to figure out how we're going to do this. And we had ourselves, we had an Australian police diving team. They're kind of like their FBI divers. We had a Chinese dive team, and then we had the Thai SEALs, and there was a whole bunch of them. So we had these 4 different people, different countries, and then we're going to try to do the same, like we had the same task. So we're like, okay, how are we going to figure this out? So the Thais had the most numbers, so we threw them in. I'll talk about chambers a lot, but chamber 2 was this huge chamber with like these 100, 200 foot cliffs, and it was pretty gnarly in there. So we put them in there because they had the numbers they could spread out. And our goal was to get the tanks from outside all the way into chamber 3. And that's where more of the really technical diving started. So they were going to just pre-stage there. So we put the Thais through chamber 2. And then chamber 1, we're going to have the U.S., the Chinese, and the Australians because we all had smaller teams. And so we're like, okay, cool. This is how we're going to work. Made sure everyone knew the plan, and we're just going to go in here and we're going to see, what this is like. None of us had been in there. Like the first time I went to dive, I had a dive tank on. And the first time I ever went in the cave, so I'm like, I have no idea what I'm getting myself into.
So what did it look like as far as like you walked up to the water? I've never really been cave diving. I assume since it was like, torrential flooding that it was all, murky and you couldn't really see too much down there, and it was a cave. So it was most likely dark aside from whatever lights they can provide. But what was that like?
So they provided some lights in there, or at least to the initial dive site. There was like a maybe 200 meter walk to get to the first time you had to dive, and they had some lights set up there. And then we had lights on our helmet. We made sure each person had 2 light sources, and we kind of did a deep, or not even deep dive, a rough "this is how not to die" while cave diving class with Jamie Brisbane, who was the PJ that knew how to dive or cave dive. And so he kind of just wrote it on a board like, "This is how you don't die,"
Don't get trapped. Make sure your air is full.
Yeah. And so,
oh my God.
So we go in there, and so you can't, if you turn the lights off, it's just black. And then you can't see through the water, just mud water basically. And you walk to the rock wall, and it looked like it was just a rock wall that went down into water, but actually you would go underwater and then you went under that wall. And I guess the biggest thing is we didn't know how big the next chamber was because we were asking people, but no one was really giving us the right answer. So we sent the first 2 guys in, and we're like, okay, if we don't hear from you in 10 minutes, we'll go to you. Because we realized we can't follow Navy dive manual rules in a cave. So like our rules is if you send a diver by themselves, it has to be tended like on a line. You can't have someone, hooked onto a line trying to maneuver through a cave.
Yeah, because the line will foul them. The line will actually catch them on stuff. And oh man.
Yeah. So it was one of those we had to kind of do a risk management. Like, okay, we were going to blatantly break Navy dive rules because like we can't do it safely if we follow the rules. So that was kind of a conversation we had to have with a few people.
This has all of the hallmarks of a great PJ mission. You guys got to
rules. You got to break those rules. Hey, more guidelines.
They're more guidelines than anything else.
Yeah. But yeah, so we sent 2 guys in. 10 minutes go by. I'm the safety diver. 15 minutes go by, and then we're like, "Oh, okay." We're trying to figure out. Like, we don't want to panic, obviously, but they're breaking the timeline, and then I'm about to go. Like I had regular in my mouth. I've been checked. I'm about to go try to find these guys, and they pop up, and they were just like, "It's way bigger than we thought." And that's what they want to do. They wanted to see how big our little area of responsibility was, and it was like probably 4 times what we thought it was going to be.
Oh wow!
And we only had 4 divers ready at that time, U.S. divers at least. So we're like, well, we don't want to just wait, so we're going to try to do this. And so we start moving tanks, and we wouldn't see each other for like 20 minutes. You're just like walking through this cave by yourself, dragging them through the water. Yeah, after it was a dive, it really wasn't that long, and you just kind of popped up, and that was where we had to carry them. And so we wouldn't see each other forever, and then we just drop them off and like put a chem light or something on them so they could find them. And we kind of did that, and we did shifts, and we did that for at least 2 days, if not, I think it was only 2 days, but we spent some hours in there, and we take them all the way into chamber 2, and the Thai SEALs had set up a rope system, like a pulley system, to get them up over these cliffs, which was really smart because it was real muddy. And we just kept doing that, and we got all those tanks in there within a couple of days. So it was pretty cool to be able to do that.
What was the depth and distance that you had to kind of go through in order to get those tanks to the other side of the chamber?
Yeah, so it was, you only went like a foot or 2 down. And then the distance was probably maybe 50 yards. It really wasn't that far.
But that's the thing is like when people think cave, you're thinking like a small cave that like a bear resides in. What was it? What was the total area that you guys were working? Like how big was this cave complex? Like if you,
I think
a football field or whatever you want to compare it to.
Well, I think like the whole thing all the way to where the kids ended up being, we're looking at maybe a couple miles.
Oh crap!
Oh yeah, yeah. I heard a lot of different things, and I was trying to look at a map and try to figure out. But like, I'll get into it later. But just the travel to get a kid all the way out was like 5 hours.
Oh wow!
This was a cave. Like this is.
Yeah, well, I wasn't even tracking that, man. Like I had seen,
was long.
I had seen some diagrams and stuff. Obviously, not to scale. However, I was. You hear cave rescue, and you're just like, oh yeah. I mean, it's a cave. You walk right in it and come back out.
It was a long one. Luckily, it was just a one way in, one way out. There was only one shoot off, and they were able to realize that there's like no way they could have went that way. Because if there would have been multiple branches like this, there's no way. But yeah, so the actual dive was pretty short, but it was still weird, obviously. And it was kind of like diving under a boat because you're like bumping your head on stuff, and you realize that like I can't come up if I want. Like I have to either go this way or go this way.
No.
So that mentally, that's a little weird. And we had guys that, they spent hours, and all they did was they went back and forth, and they would pop up, and they would just stand there, and someone would clip as many tanks on them as they could move, and then they would swim, stand up, someone would hook them off, and then they just did that. and then the rest of us would carry him around and all that.
So from, kind of notification or whenever they first got into the cave, these 12 kids and their coach, to this point right now where you guys are kind of, bringing the tanks up to the second phase, then how much time has elapsed so far? And the kids are they didn't have any lunches or water or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
how much time do you think?
I think to this time, they'd been in there for like a week to 8 days, I think, because they were in there 23rd. And I think this was around the 1st is when we were doing this. So they'd been in there a long time, like to the point where we're like, the odds are they're probably not alive, or at least some of them have not survived. And once we got all those tanks in there, the divers were able to continue on and keep searching. And then on the 2nd of July, so after they'd been in there for like 9-10 days, that's when the British divers found them and found all of them. And that was insane because really at that point we were like, I don't know how this is going to go,
How did that affect the teams? I'm sure you guys probably had to talk about, the real possibility of, hey, is this a rescue or is this kind of moving towards a recovery? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think luckily we're pretty used to that, being able to transition from rescue to recovery and kind of change the speed and the way we think about it. So it wasn't too bad. Like obviously, you're thinking about a bunch of kids and, that does wear on you, but it was just guys understood that this was going into it. They already understood there was a huge chance that they weren't going to survive. So, but I do know the British divers I talked to, they struggled with the fact that they found these kids, they're all alive, and then they have to swim back out, not knowing if they'll ever be able to come see them again.
Yeah, well, and I guess what was the feeling when the British divers came back and they were like, "Holy crap, guys! Like this, like they're all alive."
Yeah. It was one of those like rejoice, we're so excited they're all alive, and then like, how are we going to get them out of there?
even just saying it to you right now, of like that feeling, like I was getting goosebumps because I've been in that situation where like, holy cow, that we have a shot at this thing. Like that had to be awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. But then that, as awesome as that was,
and then the reality sets in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we're like, okay, the water's not going to recede for like 4 months. And that's what we were told by the history of that cave. And we're like, we have a bunch of kids in here that maybe know how to swim, maybe not, but that doesn't really matter because they're in a cave and it's flooded. So like, it doesn't matter if they can swim. So, then we started trying to figure, okay, how are we going to do this? And we're working with, obviously all the cave dive specialists, and, the Thais, and then us trying to figure this problem out. And it was the last thing that we ever thought we were going to do or wanted to do was try to dive these out, because this has never happened before. Like there's been dive rescues of a cave diver or dive body recoveries of a cave diver, but there's never been a bunch of kids in a cave that get rescued by diving. Like that's never happened, and I hope it never happens again. And we knew that this was, no matter how much risk mitigation we do, like the odds are most of them probably won't survive this. So that was pretty difficult to try to, like, you want to mitigate as much as possible, but you really can only do so much. And then trying to execute that plan when you know that, it's probably not going to work out as well as you would like. That was pretty difficult for everyone involved.
What was the actual age of these kids? Just trying to wrap my head around like how hard it would be to teach them.
Like 8 to 15-ish, maybe. Like some of them were tiny. And that kind of caused an issue too. It's like, okay, we got a bunch of kids that are fairly different sizes. How are we going to do this? So then we started figuring out the plan. We're like, okay, divers will go in, they'll get them, and then they're going to dive them out. Okay, how can we do this? All right, so if we use a normal scuba regulator and that thing gets bumped out of their mouth, not good. Okay, so we'll use a full face. Sweet. full face dive masks are not made for little
For
kids.
8-year-old Thai kids. Holy cow. Yeah, like what are you gonna do?
So strangely, a local school volunteered to have us test it out on their kids, like some of the kids' friends.
All right, hold on.
They went to the pool and actually tested this thing out.
You're telling me that you had an actual human trial in a pool and kids volunteered to help you guys out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the government allowed it.
That is
testing on
that
kids.
is wild. I had never heard that before. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's so at the time it didn't seem weird to us, but then when you really think about it, you're like, yeah, that's weird.
In retrospect, you're like, wow, that's insane.
But it shows the buy-in that this country had. They were like, we're going to get these kids out.
Man, that's awesome.
No matter awesome. What. So, yeah, and the fact that the kids, their friends were like, yeah, all right. So they tested it out and figured out that the masks actually would work. You just have to crank on them. And then we're like, okay, well, 5 hours in this cave and this water is not warm. We're like, these kids will die of hypothermia. So we're like, okay, we'll swim in wetsuits to them. Well, they also don't really make a lot of wetsuits in Thailand for little kids.
Man.
We're like, okay, well, we're going to have to figure it out, So some of these kids had some big old wetsuits on. It was, we had to do what we had to do. And then, so we figured out how they're going to breathe, figure out how to get them from, freezing to death. And then we're like, okay, we can't really, to put someone through that traumatic of an experience that's not used to diving, doesn't know what's going on, and has just been in a cave for 2 weeks at this point. The divers were like, we cannot do this if they're conscious. This will mess them up for life. If they even survive, odds are they're going to kill themselves and us by freaking out.
Oh, so did the Thai kids and the coach in the cave, did they speak English?
I think one of them did.
Okay. Did you guys ever have an interpreter that you had to dive in or get one of those Thai SEALs to go in and explain the plan?
Yeah. So it might have been around the same time that we were planning this. 4 Thai SEALs and 1 Thai Navy or Thai Army doctor went all the way back. And then one of the kids would also translate if, whenever the British divers would go up to them. And they'd actually even almost every day someone would go back there, after we found them, and they were having them write notes to their families and then bringing them back and then doing a really, really long text message, basically. That way, the kids had some contact and getting more atmospherics on what's going on. And also during that, I kind of missed, we suspected that the oxygen levels were dropping in the cave.
Oh, perfect. Because it's not complex enough.
Yeah. So we put in an atmospheric monitor so that we could show that the O2 is going down. And then the more I think about it, I just keep thinking of other stuff. Another issue we ran into before we even figured out how we're going to get them out is okay, they haven't eaten or drank water. Yeah,
I was going to ask if you were transporting food and water in there. Yeah.
They said they were drinking water off the cave, it would drip, and they would just kind of sit there and it would land in their mouth. So.
Can I ask at this point, so from home station to where you're at now, it seems like every 3 hours your expectation or your bar of normal to difficult keeps going up. Did you ever look back at any point and be like, this is getting out of control? Yesterday I thought this was difficult, but today it's like exponential growth on the what I used to consider difficult, scale.
Yeah, it definitely changed, and what we thought we wouldn't do, through mission planning and risk assessment, would be like, okay, yeah, we do that, or there was always some curveball that would come at us, or you had to adjust a lot. And that was our commander and our senior enlisted. They were crushing it because they were taking the brunt of all that. And then they would just filter it down in bite-sized chunks to the team guys. And we'd be like, okay, yeah, we can figure this problem out or whatever. Because the food and water thing was a huge issue. It's okay, how do we get food and water back into this cave? You can't just carry it, So the divers actually had this PVC pipe tube that they used for carrying stuff, and we shoved it full of MREs, as many as we could fit in there. And then we took a Skedco bag, so our litters, and we shoved that full of MREs, but then we couldn't get it to sink. So then we had to like fill it up with sand and rocks and all kinds of stuff. So we had the Skedco bag and then the PVC pipe, and then we had enough food in there for them to survive, depending on how much they ate, for another week or so. And we were told, I think there was about 4 or 5 of us, are like, hey, take this in and take it as far as you can. Which they probably should have given us more guidelines on that, but we're like, okay. And, I think this was on the 4th of July, I believe. And so we start walking, and actually it was awesome. It was just a group of us. No one had been in there that day. The water was clear, and we were just having our own little hiking trip in this cave. And the water had receded a little bit, so we were able to get all the way to the back of Chamber 2 without any diving. And at this point, also in the operation, we decided we don't want to carry scuba tanks on our backs anymore. It's too heavy, and it was kind of sketchy in Chamber 2 with those cliffs. And so another improvised thing that hopefully is never written down that you can do is we use the aircraft bailout bottles. They're like this big.
And we are you talking like the low pressure yellow bottles?
Yeah, we just strapped them to our belts.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
Yeah, we made like 550 cord harnesses for them and strapped them to our belts.
Oh, man.
And, low drag.
Because why not?
So,
yeah, because why not? Yeah. It's already dangerous enough. We might as well try some movie type stuff. I can't wait till Ryan Gosling plays you in a movie and I get to watch this happen on the big screen.
Yeah. So we get to the end of Chamber 2, and none of us had ever been past that. So we're like, well, they told us to take it as far as we want. We have these tanks on us. Like, might as well go to Chamber 3. So we dive through there, and we had to squeeze through this area that was like pretty tiny. Like you had to wiggle through it. And once we got to the other end, we had some ties behind us, some tie seals, and one of them had an issue and actually had a shallow water blackout. And so we just happened to randomly be there. Again, I just happened to randomly be there. And we were able to assist them in resuscitating him and brought him back. And he went about his day, and we went about our day. And I don't think we ever saw him again.
I think every time you show up just in time to rescue someone, we can stop using the word random because it just doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah.
It's just too consistent. It's like, well, yeah, this is the plan from wherever that OB was going to be there to rescue whoever needed rescuing at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that was lucky. And so we drop off the food, and then we're coming back out, and then it's again we run into some of our leadership, and we're like, all right, so this happened. This just happened. And so that was pretty eventful 4th of July for us. But yeah, so we were able to get food and water back to them, and that gave us a little bit more time to figure this problem out. So yeah, back to how we were actually going to take them out. What we ended up doing was we were able to get an Australian world-renowned cave diver who also was an anesthesiologist. Don't know how that works, but
it's quite the resume there.
Yeah. So he was able to show up, and then him and our PJ Med director and a few other docs figured out a way to medically sedate the children and get them out so that they won't freak out. The divers will be safer, and that they won't remember it, so they won't have PTSD or any other psychological issues. And then we just had to go through the process of getting that approved, because it is kind of weird to go to the Thai government and be like, hey, so we're gonna drug up a bunch of kids and then we're gonna dive them out of the kid. Cool.
Man, I cannot wait to find out that this has all been an elaborate ruse. If you told this story, if you sat somebody down and you're like, listen to what happened, there's no way that I'd believe this. Like, this is fake. This is fake news off a Wikipedia article, 100%.
Yep, I made all of it up.
It's like a stolen valor story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, it was like, okay, now we need to get our mission or our plan approved. And we had all the different specialties, different international teams all getting together, making sure this all made sense. and then we present it to the Thai government so that they could, give the go ahead. And then finally we got the go ahead, and basically the plan was we're going to do 4 kids a day, and then that was going to be 3 days to get 4, and then we realized the last day we're actually going to have to do 5 because there was a monsoon coming in, and the last thing we wanted was to leave one person in there.
Of course, there's a monsoon coming in. Why wouldn't there be a monsoon?
So we had 3 days to knock this out before this monsoon was supposed to hit. So we did 4, 4, and then 5. And the way we separated it out was the British divers who had been there the longest were the ones that were actually going to do the transporting of the children. There's going to be 1 diver and 1 kid. And the Australian diver, who was an anesthesiologist, would be in the farthest chamber, and he would prep the kids and get them all ready to go. And they put them in a wetsuit. They bungee corded a air tank to their chest, and then zip tied their hands and their feet together so that they were just a nice, little package, basically, so they wouldn't get caught on anything.
Little kid torpedoes.
Yeah, little kid torpedoes. Yeah. And then we had some other cave divers that had flown in, had been requested by name, and they came in as we call them support divers, and they would be in chambers 4 through 8 in certain areas to help switch out air tanks, carry the children if it was like a dry area or anything like that. So they kind of took care of that. And then we were the primary in chamber 3 and 2 with the Thai SEALs and the Chinese team and a Thai civilian rope rescue team. And then chamber 1 all the way out was going to be the Thai SEALs and some of the Thai Army, and then they would finally take them out to an ambulance who would take them to the hospital. So my role was in chamber 3. I was the lead medic, and basically the way we figured this out was we had no communication from chamber 3 on, and so everything was on a timeline. So we knew exactly or roughly how long it would take. And then we separated each kid by approximately 30 minutes so that there was no bumping into each other. But that was it. As soon as those divers left, we didn't hear anything for hours. And we were just hanging out there, and basically there was a guideline that the divers would follow, and it was like a fishing line. We'd see that thing moving, and someone would yell, "Fish on," and we'd all run over there to our stations, But the issue was we had no idea the status of the children. And I alluded to it earlier. We were like, hey, maybe half, if we're lucky, will survive this. Something's going to happen. Their mask is going to get bumped and they're going to suffocate, or something's going to happen. And so literally I'm just standing in the water with another PJ, a special tactics officer, this Chinese guy, and some Thai SEALs, and we're just waiting, just standing in the water, and then a little Thai boy would just pop out of the water with no idea what their status was.
Oh wow.
and so it was my job to figure out what was going on. And so I'd flip them over, assess them, make sure their air tank was good, that the mask was good, that they weren't too cold, and then make sure sedation wise they were good to go. And then then I would make sure the diver was good too. I didn't want to ignore them because, of course, they're world renowned, but I didn't want to grab the kid and run away, and then the diver pass out by some dive injury or something.
So with the anesthesia, though, I mean, the doc was down there at the furthest point with the kids doing his thing or her thing, and then by the time they got to you, did you have to give certain bumps, because you said there's 8 chambers, so 8 times they had to go through over 5 hours? I imagine it would be wearing out.
Yeah, so there's certain people throughout the rest of the cave that were trained on how to give the medications. So that's how they kept them sedated throughout. And then we just basically our goal was they get prepped, and then they wake up in the hospital, and that's exactly what happened. So they've been asked multiple times, they don't remember anything.
Oh man, that's so awesome. Yeah, like this thing was so complex and there were constantly new challenges that you guys had. The fact that you performed even down to the kids not having a traumatic experience from this entire thing is absolutely, I don't know if I should call it a miracle or if I should, just harp on the professionalism that you guys had on this one, but it's straight up amazing, man. And I mean that in the truest sense of the word. That's just crazy.
Yeah, we were pretty excited that it happened because we weren't sure if they would remember anything. Because even if you're sedated, sometimes your eyes are open. So we look at them like, oh, they're looking right into my soul right now, but they don't remember any of it. So so that was my job, and everyone had the exact same job. So I assessed them. A few of the other guys helped me. We'd put them on a Skedco litter, strap them all up, take them up this little hill. The Thai medical team did their final check because they were the ones that had to give the final, like, we're good to go. And then I had another PJ that had a rope lowering system set up, and they had to go down this mudslide. And the kids weren't heavy enough to make the rope system work. And so myself and another PJ had to hang on it and slide down this hill to two other PJs that were in the water with dive rigs on, and they would dive them the last, about 50 feet or so to where the Australians were. The Australians would push them up through this hole that was like this big to another special tactics team and the Thai rope rescue team, who had set up high lines, like zip lines throughout this cave, chamber 2, because we were worried about those cliffs.
Because that's where the cliffs were, right? Oh yeah. Why wouldn't you have to zip line them across the 100-foot cliffs in the cave after the dive?
So then we had a mix of PJs, controllers, the Chinese team was in there, and then the Thai rope rescue team was in there, and they were all spread out in different areas to make sure this thing was safe. So they would run the kids through the zip lines, and then from there they would do a final check on them, make sure they're good, pass them off to there was about 100 other Thais that were in there, pass them off to them, and then they would kind of switch off carrying all the way out into the ambulance and then take them out. And so that's what we did, and we had to do that 13 times.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it was exhausting physically and mentally. Like, I'm telling you, I'm just standing in the water, just waiting for a dead kid to pop up, basically.
Holy, yeah.
And that's how I had to think of it, because if I thought that they were fine, then they would pop up and not be fine, and then I wouldn't be ready for it. So
that's what I was going to ask. Like, that sense of impending dread, because I'm the type of guy that's always waiting for that other shoe to fall. So it almost had to be worse that everybody kept coming up okay, because you're like, where is the bad stuff going to start happening? Like, that had to be
make sure complacency didn't become an issue.
Oh, wow.
People wanted to start kind of switching jobs, get more people in there. We're like, nope, no changes, no deviations.
Yeah.
We're going to do this exactly the same every single time.
So you said it was going to be 5 per day. Did you guys evacuate after the end of we're out of tanks, let's just get everyone out of here? Or did you guys stay in the cave that entire 3 days, in your chamber, waiting for resupply? They're going to be back in 4 hours. Let's take a nap.
Yeah, almost all of us would come out. There was a contingent of Thai SEALs that would stay in chamber 3, and they would kind of cycle out. I don't know what their shifts were, but they would cycle out. But the rest of us, we'd do our job. Okay, we knocked out that 4 of the day. We'd go home, sleep, rest up, come back, 4 more, and then we just kind of did that. We didn't want people getting too tired, because towards the beginning of this thing, guys were sleeping on cots outside, and our sleep schedule was a little jacked up. So we wanted to make sure that guys were as ready as possible. To make sure that nothing unforeseen could happen. We tried to mitigate as much risk as possible. And so sleeping was, huge for them. Yeah. And that's what we did. So, but the thing is all of them survived, but there were some issues that came up that were, super scary. We had, one of the kids, one of the first ones, actually, I think it was maybe the second or third one, would just stop breathing randomly, and the divers couldn't figure it out. And they would flip them over, and they would breathe fine, and they're like, "Okay, we're good." And then they would try to dive, and the kid would stop breathing, so they'd have to pop up, try to figure it out. And they sat there for about 30 minutes trying to readjust their their wetsuit, the bungee cords, like, okay, what is wrong with the mask? And then at some point they figured it out. They actually don't even know it at what point it fixed, but it worked out. And then the scariest one for me probably was, so, I said earlier we had those timelines. So it's like 30 minutes or whatever. And as a diver would come up with a kid, one of the last things I would ask him is, how far back is the next guy? And one of the guys said, 30 minutes. 30 minutes goes by. 45 minutes goes by. An hour goes by. And we're starting to look at each other like, okay, what do we do here? So one, we were told not to go past chamber 3, but, we've already established that we'll break some rules if we need to.
Yeah, you've already been there. What are you going to do? Get chewed out? I'm sure you've been chewed out before.
Yeah, exactly. But the real thing we wanted to figure out was like, okay, say I want to be the hero. I put my stuff on and I start diving. I swim in this way into a tight cave, and then they actually are coming this way, and then we run into each other. And then 4 people die. So it was like, okay, as hard as it was, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to wait. Just going to wait it out and figure out what happens. And I think it was almost an hour and a half by the time they finally popped up. And what had happened is the diver had lost the guideline and he couldn't find it. And he had found an old pump that had been in there prior to the whole cave flooding. And he followed that, but he went the wrong way and popped up in a different part of the cave that he didn't recognize. And of course, he pops up. Kid starts coming out of sedation. The kid's hypothermic. He doesn't know where he's at, and he's by himself. And so he's trying to figure all this out. And luckily, we had that timeline again. Is the next team was coming in, and they heard each other or saw each other or something, and they were able to work all that out.
How
we
wild!
Didn't know any of this was happening.
How wild must that be for that guy? Like, to just pop up in a cave and expect to see the entire rescue team, and he's like, "Guys."
Yeah. And it shook him pretty good.
Yeah, I'm terrified.
Yeah, I need a break.
My heart rate is 180. Yeah. I wasn't even there.
Yeah. So that happened. And luckily, it worked out and it was fine. I had another one that freaked me out. The diver shot out of the water and was like, "Is he still alive?" And handed him to me, and I was like, "Whoa!" That shows how much stress he was under. And then he had no way of actually being able to check because of how tight it was, because there were some parts where they could kind of hold him up and you could hear the bubbles or whatever, but it must have been so tight in there. He had no way to know. And he was like, okay, I'm just going to get out of this cave or this section as fast as possible to figure it out.
So he literally put himself at risk of dying coming up that fast to get the kid. Holy cow.
Yep. So luckily he was fine. I think he was breathing slow or something. And the diver ended up being fine, but it was just these little things kept happening that just drove up the intensity. Trying to think if there's any other big ones, but those were some of the big factors. And luckily nothing really bad happened past, that area. The high line worked flawlessly. The carrying them out was good. The ambulance was pre-staged. All that stuff worked awesome. It was just some of those little things. But then, of course, we get all the kids out and we're like, amazing, high fives. We crushed it. And Murphy, loves to, stick his head into missions. We were waiting for the Thai SEALs and that Army guy that were back with the cave. They were going to come afterwards. So we were like, well, we'll wait for them, just in case something happens. As they're starting to finish coming out in chamber 3, we had brought everyone in. We're taking pictures, somebody got KFC in there somehow and we're celebrating. And so
I'm sorry, Kentucky Fried
KFC.
Chicken?
Yep. Not sure why or where it came from, but it ended up in the cave. And there was some McDonald's too.
Okay. Man, I don't even know. I just don't believe any of this. I can't. I don't know.
We'll just wait.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, there's more.
So there's a bunch of people in this cave, and in chamber 3, people had started taking out all the air tanks because we're like, hey, we're good. Take out. We don't need these air tanks. We're good to go. Luckily, we kept a few of the small ones because the water pumps that had been keeping this water at bay just exploded.
Oh my God.
Guys run over, they fix it, and they're like, okay, we're good. It explodes again. And at this point, one of the Australian guys comes from chamber 2, comes into chamber 3. He's like, I can visibly see it moving. As I'm looking at, I can visibly see this rising. You need to leave right now. And we had like 50, 60 people in this chamber with 3 small little air bottles. And this cave's about to reflood. And so myself and the stow were like, hey, we're going to stay back. You guys get out of here like right now.
So there you are, belly full of 13 herbs and spices.
Yeah.
You got
Everyone finish your drumstick. We got to go.
Yeah.
Nom. Look at him. Look at him. He loves it.
Let me have some extra sauce.
So we call it a penguining because we had that mudslide I was talking about earlier, and guys are just diving down this thing,
You got to slide.
on their bellies, on their butts.
You guys are in your pain cave. Slide.
Slides, yeah.
Yeah, so guys are sliding out, and myself and the stow are just watching this chaos happen. We actually, even in the stressful situation, we were just laughing. We're like, this is really funny. Just watching all these grown men just freak out.
What else can you do?
Out of this cave.
Exactly.
And then we go, and by the time, this was only, a few minutes really by the thing exploding, and by the time we were leaving, I think the water had risen, 3 feet maybe, to the point where there was only like this much air left from chamber 3 to 2. And there was actually one point where there was it was fully solid.
Wow.
And so we actually had to do a breath hold, and it was real short, but do a breath hold and get over into chamber 2.
Hey, bud.
And then
that's why you went to selection, homie. One's ready.
Yeah.
Get up for it, dude.
Buddy breathing.
Yeah. Holy cow.
And then we got out, and all the kids survived, and
man, take just a second and try to describe when you guys were out, when you and the stow were out. No kidding, there's no more danger. You guys are on the back end of it. And not only through whatever miracle did everybody survive, but you brought the entire team out. Man, what was the vibe at that cave? Yeah,
so a lot of us, it was almost strange because one, it was surreal. So we're more just like, well, I'm tired, but the fact that we just done this, and we're in the cave, and so it's just us. So it's kind of more work. We're just walking out of the cave, and then we walk out, and there's just tons of people, cheering us on and taking pictures. And
oh, wow.
We're trying to get out. We're just like, hey, I'm tired. Get on my way. But you're also excited. It was just kind of a weird combination of I don't know. It was just strange. You didn't want to just run around excited, but you were inside. You were super excited, but it was just still.
You just won the Super Bowl, man.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to keep that emotion in check? Even has it changed? Now that you look back on it, has time kind of changed the way that you feel about the rescue, or is it just sort of surreal?
Yeah, I still sometimes I think about it, and I'm like, I don't know how that worked. How did that work?
How did they survive, and then how did we survive? I didn't mention, but there was one Thai prior SEAL that did die, which was a tragedy, but still, the fact that I feel like more people should have died in this, with how many bad things happened, how high the risk was, it just kind of blows my mind to this day, that all of us were able to pull this off. Yeah.
I think, one of the key things that they look for now and for guys in selection is the ability to problem solve. And you guys have obviously exemplified that throughout the course of you telling this entire story. And I'm sure looking back at it, you're like, you make the best decision with whatever information you have at the time. And it sounds like, there are a lot of barriers to making sure that it was kind of successful. The the water coming up and the kids having to be sedated, like so many different things that you guys had to overcome, and just constant problem solving going through your head and figuring out like, what do I need to do now in order to make this stuff happen? So what were some of your best lessons learned, and some things that you think, any of these guys that are getting ready to do this kind of job and go to selection, what can they kind of take away from this and kind of apply to the selection?
Yeah, so a few things you kind of hit on is the problem solving. Like we're good at a lot of these different things, but we're usually not the experts in any one thing. But one thing that we are good at is problem solving. Like that's what we're made to do, is we solve the Air Force's problems. So the fact that we were able to get there, figure out, okay, we're not the experts, but who is the experts? And then grab them. Okay, who's the experts in this? Grab them. Okay, these guys, grab them, and then try to get them all on the same page, and then methodically mission plan that. That's a skill a lot of people don't have, is to be able to just like take all these assets and then put them all together and be like, all right, this is how this is going to work. So I think that's the biggest thing that we had, and that's something that I think people need to focus more on, is that, that's really what we're there for, is to solve these weird, complex problems. And that's kind of a lot of the training iterations that you go through, or selection or something. You may be like, I don't understand. Like, I'm never going to be sitting here with one snorkel and passing it with another guy. Like, that would be dumb. But that is a stressor that can help you later, and there's like these little things that you don't realize. Maybe people, when they came up with that, probably didn't even realize exactly, but it's like these little tests that you run through over and over and over and over again help you in ways that you won't even fathom later on. And then other issues we ran into is, so as operators, sometimes we can be pretty brash, and we're like, this is how this is going to happen. I'm the expert. Get out of my face. You can't do that. Like, there's certain instances where you can do that, maybe in a combat environment, but there's other times where you have to understand cultures, and you have to understand points of view, and you have to understand, like, what's this person's goal? What's my goal? How can we work this out? And that was something we really had to figure out with the Thai government and the Thai civilians, is like they have a very different culture.
Well, and they have their own political goals and optics that they're concerned with, and a whole bunch of layers on top of there that had to be really, really complex.
Yeah, and that's where we kind of found those experts. Like there was a guy named Josh Morris who was a civilian, and he was like our main connection. And if without him, I don't think this would have worked, just because of that cultural barrier and the relationship that he had already built with some of these people was how we were able to get a voice. And so understanding that, and not just being like, I don't understand you, so you must be wrong. That's not the right attitude. So that was a huge learning curve for us to try to fit into this situation and be like, okay, we're not in charge. Here is our plan. Do you like it? Mm-hmm. And then trying to humble ourselves really to that point, and then be like, okay, you don't like it. What about this? And then just kind of work in that. I think is, it's a huge thing, and it's hard to teach, but it's something that you'll kind of figure out, or you'll learn the hard way. But it's something to be aware of. And you have to be ready for these kind of situations. Not everything is running and gunning and, dropping bombs. Like sometimes you have to, I wouldn't say play the game, but, be a little bit more political and try to get the mission done in ways that you don't think you would have to do. If that makes sense. But
yeah, it sounds like, go ahead, Trent.
I mean, there's only really two things that I've heard consistently since the day I got on team. And one is SOF is just high-level problem solving, like you said. And two is it's personality-based. Like, it's a personality-based business. And that's how you get through all those different types of mission sets and scenarios, and build those relationships and understand how to get to mission success through, relationships and personalities. So, yeah, I've always heard that stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like overall this was a huge practice in water confidence. If we were to tell a person that's just off the street, this is part of selection. You're going to have to do all the things that you just described in this podcast right now. Like go from one cave into another cave. You don't know, like you're facing a wall. You have to go under this wall into another cave. You don't know how far it's going to be. You're just going to have to go through this murky water that's cold to find some kids that possibly are not still alive and then figure out how you're going to drag them out. That's extreme practice in WaterCon. And, you know, guys that are in the pool in clear water, it's 88 degrees or whatever the temperature of the pool is, and they're just passing a snorkel back and forth. I think it's important to try to just fathom exactly all the things that you're going through. And it's like an extreme level. Like you went through selection in doc and you kind of paid your dues. You can reach back to that and think about all the times when you were choking on water and how hard it was during 10-ups and all that stuff with your team. And now here you are with your team and you're doing kind of the same thing, but it's reality, life or death. And like you said, someone actually died down there, a person who was, you know, a little bit higher level in their profession. They have experience and all that kind of stuff. And it's a constant danger kind of thing. So staying calm, like you were talking about, and being able to just compartmentalize and do the best problem solve with whatever you have in front of you, and making sure that all of your team stays alive is huge. And that's what a lot of the instructors are looking for, is your ability to do that and just organize. Like, okay, this is what I got. Let me reform a plan. This is our best shot right here. Let's try this. Let's do this. So it's really awesome to hear all the things that you went through and kind of the basics of, you know, none of this by itself, I guess, was really that hard, but all of this compounded is like ridiculous. And good job, like keeping everything together. Like you said, you're the main medic, and it sounds like you kept your cool through this entire ordeal. So how long were you down there overall, doing all this stuff? Was the total time elapsed?
I think we were there for a total of 3 weeks. We had a few days on the back end to, you know, reconstitute and get out of there. And then, you know, we had a few days up in the mountains, and then we had the main time was either diving or mission planning or prepping gear. So yeah, we were there for about 3 weeks total. Yeah. And then one thing I was just thinking of as you're talking is, like, again, sometimes the water confidence, for instance, doesn't always make sense, but it's one of those, like, we need people. If you can be calm when you can't breathe, like when you can breathe, it's like, cool, like this is fine. Like I can handle this. And that's one of those, like, it's a little way that you don't realize that helps, is putting you under stress when you can't breathe, so that when you're in a firefight, you're figuring out how to get some kids, you're under rotor wash in the ocean, like all these strange things that you can't simulate in a selection. That's what those are for, is to get you ready for things that, you know, you can't simulate.
Yeah, you got to be moving when your heart rate's up, when everyone else is freaking out around you. Like you said, when that one dude kind of bolted out and then thrusted a kid at you, I'm sure your immediate thought was like, oh, this kid is, something's really wrong with this kid. But he was fine. You have to just not tailor everyone else's or your own attitude to everyone else's, and just stay calm. So that is huge. Trent, Aaron, you got any more questions or anything?
I mean, I got like a million questions. But
I got so many questions.
No, we're good.
Yeah, no, Obi, thanks for coming on and telling your story, man. Like, that's just absolutely outstanding. And again, from one PJ to another, man, great job. Way to uphold that motto, and the whole team over there internationally, everybody that was involved. Man, this was a once in a lifetime sort of thing, and you guys just crushed it. So thanks for coming on and telling the story. It's important to get it out there. So I just appreciate you, man. That's all.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. I think everyone knows part of this story, but I think it's really important to learn about the people that, you know, did it, and all these different career fields, all these different countries. Like, you know, everyone came together and figured this out, worked outside of their, you know, their careers, their lane. You know, sometimes you got to go outside that lane, and this was proof of, you know, if you're willing to adapt and humble yourself and bring in people that know more than you, like, it's insane the things that you can achieve and figure out in some of these missions that you may have.
Yeah, I want to thank you again for coming on, and for all those people that are listening right now. Make sure that you check out the other episode we talked to OB about and any of the other episodes. We'd love to have you back on the show again. I know you're going to keep on doing awesome stuff. And are you going to go around and do some more speaking tours or any of that kind of stuff in the future?
So I leave in a couple of days, and I'm going to the Air Force Academy for the National Character and Leadership Symposium. I'm going to be on a board there, answering some questions and doing a tour and hanging out with some of the cadets. And then I move from there, and then I go to Orlando for the Air Warfare Symposium, doing similar stuff. I think I'll be speaking on a board and talking to some people. And then I head back to Japan, and I go back to my normal job. And then I may have some stuff later on in the year.
Cool. So if you guys are in that area, we'll share some stories on the One's Ready page about, if you're in the area, whenever he's able to speak, and hopefully you guys can go hook up with him, talk to him. Really humble, awesome guy. Lots to learn from OB for sure. Really appreciate you coming out here and talking about this stuff. I think it's important for us to, again, take the lessons learned, apply them to the future generation that's going to be put in these scenarios. Who knows what it's going to be in the future, but it's important to take these lessons and apply them as much as we can. So I really appreciate you. If you go through this whole episode again, it was hard for me to actually compartmentalize everything you were saying, and really awesome job with all of it. So check out the documentary too if you can't picture it. We'll throw some pictures up on here so you guys can try and visualize what he's talking about as we see it through his eyes. It was great to just listen to. So make sure you guys check out the previous episode, and you guys can reach out anytime to us, info@onesready.com, or you can hit us up on Instagram. And then if you have any questions for OB, just shoot them to us and we'll shoot them to him, and we'll help you guys out that way. So thanks again for listening to the podcast. Love to have you on again, OB. Thanks, Trent and Aaron, for taking the time out. Also, we'll see you guys on the next one. Go out there, earn each breath, and work on that water con.
Get it. Train hard, everybody.
Later.
Thanks for having me.